Inside SFPS. My name is Cody Donarski, Public Information Officer with Santa Fe Public Schools, and today I am joined by Miss Michelle Armijo, who is a third grade teacher at Pinon Elementary. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this.
I am very excited as well. This is going to be a fun one. As you know, we had been chatting a little bit before the podcast that this is probably the second time we've really met. The first time was at Golden Apple, which we'll get into. I won't bring that up now, but so this is really going to be, getting to know you and hearing your story. And so let's jump right into it. So are you a native of Santa Fe?
Yes. So I was born and raised in Santa Fe. I came to school. I attended many different schools in Santa Fe. And the sad thing is some of the schools I've attended are no longer schools.
Like Laragoite or Agua Fria.
Agua Fria. So I actually started at Head Start. That's where I went to preschool, which is apartments now. And then I went to Agua Fria, and that's now NIE. But then I attended Pinon. And then I actually had to move to Las Cruces because my mom was military. So middle school in Las Cruces, I came back, went to Alameda, and then I graduated from Capitol High School.
Oh, wow. So you've been all over SFPS.
To schools, yes.
And then so when you were coming through school, when you were at Capitol, was education and teaching something that you thought you wanted to do? Is that, did you have any connections to it? How did you find yourself in education?
So actually, interesting story. My fourth grade teacher here at Pinon was this amazing woman, Miss Viola Ortiz. And she got me into teaching. That's just her kindness, her love, the way she taught. I loved everything about her. But when I was at Capitol, I became a peer mentor for a D-level special education classroom. And the first year that I was a peer mentor in the class, I was in home ec with them. And so we would cook tortillas, we would watch Selena, all kinds of fun things. And because I loved it so much, I actually did peer mentoring all 4 years at Capitol. 1 year I was with Coach Hawk in PE, and I helped coach in PE. And from there, I actually went and coached Special Olympics with Coach Hawk. We coached a hockey team. Yeah, it was awesome. So that is where I was really inspired to become a teacher, to make that difference. I thought that I would go into special education, but in college, I was kind of talked out of it. So unfortunately, I don't have a special education, but that's where I decided to teach. And fun story real quick, when Miss Devotee interviewed me for the job here, she asked who inspired me as a teacher, and I named Miss Ortiz, and Miss Devotee's eyes got kind of big. When she offered me the job, my classroom was actually in Miss Ortiz's old classroom.
Was it the classroom that you were in?
It was the classroom I was in fourth grade.
What was that like? And that's the first that I've heard of any sort of like coincidence like that. Yes. What was it like probably your first day teaching? Was that your first teaching job?
No, I actually had started in Rio Rancho. Okay. So I actually taught 3 years in Rio Rancho. I took a couple years off when I had my daughter, but it was my first year in Santa Fe Public Schools. And so it was a very surreal moment. Pinon was having a ribbon cutting that year for a new hall they had built, and so they invited Miss Ortiz. So I have a picture of her in that classroom. It's just an awesome experience. That's
super cool. And I couldn't imagine walking into, I don't even remember what any of my classrooms look like. The only one I remember is because I don't want to date myself or anyone listening, but the only classroom I remember is my second grade classroom, because that was the classroom I was in when I found out about 9/11. And I was in school, I was in second grade, and I remember the layout. I remember everything about that classroom, but every other classroom I had throughout my life, I could not tell you anything about. So I can't imagine being like, okay, I'm a professional, I'm a teacher, and now I'm switching places. So these students were once me, and now that's just too surreal for me.
Yes. Well, and the crazier thing, you're not dating yourself. I was on a college bus at UNM for 9/11. So you're dating me, Cody. Even crazier. So Pinon was a church for a while. They had church here on Sundays. I made my first communion here. I gave my first confession in Miss Devotee's old office. But now my daughter's leaving Pinon. So I remember all of that when I was a kid, and now so it's full circle all the way around.
I joked after Miss Devotee retired that there was no one more Pinon to take over than Miss Agard Seiss, who is the current principal, because her parents were teachers here. She went to school here, and now she's the principal here.
Yes.
You might come in second place for that because, going to school, taking your teaching job, you're just as Pinon maybe as her, maybe a little bit less, but, so when you started, were you teaching fourth grade as well, or what grade were you teaching?
I started teaching fourth grade here. I had taught third grade in Rio Rancho, and third grade is just where my heart is. I love the curriculum, the age of the kids. So when there was an availability, I asked, and I swapped with the other third grade teacher. We switched places. She went up to fourth. What
is that like? And for someone like myself that is not an educator and doesn't understand kind of the more intricacies of curriculum and grades and all of that stuff, what really is the difference between third and fourth grade? Like, can you elaborate a little bit more? Because to most people like me, it's 1 year, one grade level, one, whatever.
Right.
What is that difference, and what kind of is in that third grade that is more special to you than what was in fourth grade?
I say, and I know this isn't true, but I say third grade is the most important grade level because everything you learn in third grade you'll use for the rest of your life. But the big difference is third grade, in my opinion, is closing out the foundation. It's closing out everything you've learned in kinder, first, and second, and you're mastering all of that. Plus, you're also starting the next level to build you up for fourth, fifth, and sixth. So they've got to learn to read or they have to be great at reading by the time they leave me. They've got to know multiplication and division, which is brand new. They've had to have mastered addition and subtraction. So it's closing out that first foundation and starting on the new one. So it's a crucial year for kids to really grasp all these concepts. They really start going into fractions. If they don't have a solid base of fractions when they leave me, fourth grade is just more detail of third grade. So they've got to be ready by the time they leave me.
So it's that kind of, it's the most important, well, I'm air quoting for those who can't see. It's kind of like that pivotal grade year of, third grade is really that benchmark of like, this is what we're learning. You have to know basically the first 3 years, kind of tie a bow on that. I got that all, and then now move forward. And that's where you really start getting into like I don't want to call it the more useful, but kind of the wider scope of everything you're going to be learning. And
getting in deeper. Also, the behavior wise or maturity wise, I should say, in third grade, I don't think anyways I'm that embarrassing yet. I'm still fun. When we sing, it's still exciting. I tell parents when their kids leave me in fourth grade, there's a huge shift. Kids see the world a little bit differently. They're not as understanding of their peers. They're not as understanding of the differences that their peers come with. So I try and really build that in third grade. Like, you just be a kind person. You accept the differences, because in fourth grade, especially come Christmas time, there's a big change in they mature,
That's interesting, especially thinking that's 1 year. It's not like we're talking third grade to fifth grade or third grade to sixth grade or whatever. That's 1 year. And for some kids, that's not even changing ages. That's just a couple of months.
A few months, yeah.
That's fascinating. And so one of the things that I know I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and since we're talking about kind of that classroom stuff, is some of the social emotional learning, the SEL practices that you implement into your classroom. Can you talk a little bit about what those are and kind of even where you've learned to implement them and what these kids are doing?
Sure. So social emotional has become my baby, especially after COVID. I've always done these and seeing every kid as an individual, but there's after COVID, there was a big difference in the kids and them belonging. And so anyways, what I do in my classroom to get my kids to buy into what I'm doing is this is their community. So at the beginning of the year, they create their community. This year, they named it the Sunflower Town, and they actually get paid classroom money, $5 a day for coming in. And this year, they picked that they'd have a mayor, and they all decided how they would pick the mayor. So the mayor pays everybody, and what it does is they each have a job. It gives them a sense of belonging and ownership for this classroom. So we talk often about everybody matters. So when one kid is misbehaving, the whole community is affected by it. The most important part of my day, I think, is our morning circle. When the kids walk in the morning, they all sit down, and the beginning of the year, we work on them. What does it look like to listen to someone? You should be looking at them. You should be facing them, hearing what they say. But in the morning circle, we started with a song, and then they share their weather for the day. And so sunny could be, I got a new dog, or cloudy could be, my grandpa's sick and he's in the hospital. So everybody gets a chance every single day. So by the time they've started the day, I've already got to hear and check in with how they're all feeling. So if someone says, my mom got mad at me this morning because I was late for getting ready, that gives me insight for when they're pouting during math to be like, you know what, you can do this, or insight to why their behaviors are the way they are. But as the kids get more comfortable with each other, they start sharing more in their weather, and it helps them to develop empathy for each other. So as they get to know each other, they'll know, well, so-and-so's grandpa's in the hospital, and so we know we have to be extra kind to this person. Gives me insight to them. It helps them develop empathy and understanding for each other. And it gives me insight for their parents. A little girl said, my mom just finished nursing school. So then when I saw mom at pickup, congratulations, you finished. So everyone's a part of the community,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And hearing that, I think there's two things that I really take away from this. That insight that it gets you, because kids might not understand. And I was just having this conversation with someone, is now that my daughter is starting to get more of a personality, I'm starting to see a little bit more of those emotions. Her favorite thing to tell me, she told me this on Saturday. I told her, I was like, no, for whatever. I think she was playing like the bubble machine was foaming at the top, and she was rubbing the soap on her face. And I was like, no, honey, we can't do that. We don't put the bubble solution on our face. And so she pouted and she got down on the ground and she goes, I'm mad at you. Oh. and I never understood as a kid when my dad would be like, or my mom would say, I know you more than you know you.
Right.
And I was like, you don't know what I'm going through or whatever. But as a parent now, I'm like, oh, I can see when my daughter is not feeling good. I can see when she's happy. I can see when she's sad. And she's only 2.5. So right. For you, the kids don't know what they're just sharing out because that's what they do. And they're a part of this community. But for you, it gives them insight of, if someone's misbehaving, but they said that it was a thunderstorm in their, what's going on with them today for their weather, okay, this is not who, little Johnny or little Susie is. She's having a tough day. I don't need to take this to heart. Where, for at least when I was growing up, if I was misbehaving in class, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know that, my dog died last night and my grandpa was in the hospital or whatever it happens to be. So it gives you insight into them and understanding, okay, this is an abnormality for this kiddo. I don't need to punish them because, they've identified that they're not okay right
exactly. Now. It's all two things to add to that. It actually helps them on the playground. There's kids where they've always been picked on or they don't have friends. And I see it year after year where they end up rallying around each other. Mm-hmm. They understand that this kid doesn't have friends or this kid is hurting because of what's happening at home. And so no longer, usually in my classrooms, is there an outcast. They usually rally together and protect each mm-hmm. other. They become a family, just like we do with our family. We protect them. That's what they do with each other, But we also talk very often, and this is gradually as we get used to this, but we still do our best. And we say, in this classroom, we get love, we get respect, and we are all so important to this classroom. And so we still do our best. So this year I lost my grandpa. He was 93. Because of this, I was able to come in the day he got sick and tell the kids, I'm not doing good. And they could see it clearly. Mm-hmm. And I said, my grandpa's not doing well. And so I have a broken heart right now. But but I'm still going to do my best today. I came to teach, and I'm still going to do my best in these groups. And so they say that themselves. I didn't sleep good last night, but I'm still going to do my best today. And so we hold each other to that. And I stole that from Mary Louise.
I was just about to say that.
Yes.
And that was the second point I was going to make, is this very much sounds like the restorative justice circles that Mary Louise or Andrea Romero do, in that the way that these kids open up. And I've talked about it in other episodes of the podcast, how much that affected me when I got to see it in person.
Yes.
And I love Andrea, I love Mariah, I love Mary Louise, I love the three Romeros,
Yes.
and I love the work that they do. And I'd heard about them, and I heard about the work they do and how transformational it was and how incredible it was. And then the first time that I saw a circle with Andrea, it really opened my eyes to how emotionally intelligent that these kids are, because you heard third graders, I think it was third or maybe it was fifth grade. I don't remember. I saw 2 classes that were doing it. And the way that they opened up to each other and the way that they shared, I had a tough morning because my mom was mad because I was running late and then that made her late for work. So she was a little short with me, but it's okay. And I would never have said that when I was in school. And I'm sure you probably wouldn't have as well. We didn't have a space.
Right.
To talk like that with our peers, and not only not have a space, but not feel like you could because you felt like, oh, you were going to get judged or,
or in trouble.
Yeah. Or in trouble, or I'm having a bad day, and, and someone else would, they'd make it worse because that's just the way it was.
Yes.
And so hearing that and hearing the best, because, what got in the way of you being at your best is, the Mary Louise line.
Yeah.
But that's so important. And, I've seen it in kids. The one kid that always comes to my mind when I say this is, she was a 5th grader at the time at Ramirez Thomas. And she said that, she was depressed and had anxiety. And ever since they started doing restorative justice, it was the happiest she's ever been. And it still makes me emotional because that's a 5th grader.
Yes.
That's 10 or 11 years old, maybe. Yeah. And being able to open up in front of her entire class
and say that
and not feel shame. And not only just say it, but be able to identify it.
Yes.
And that, to me, that is so incredibly powerful when you have kids these ages, understand what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and then express how they're feeling with a platform that they feel comfortable doing.
Right. Well, and it also opens up for teachers for the rest of the day. I can use that conversation. So, if 2 kids or one kid is making a wrong choice against another kid, I can pull them and say, are you at your best, which is Mary, but also we talk about the power. So you have a power in you to make a good choice, or you have a power to not be so kind. And it seems like you're not choosing kindness right now. What do you think? And they'll often say, I'm not choosing kindness. And so the power of your choice, you have this good side or this bad side, and what are you choosing right now? So that morning circle all day lends itself to cutting behaviors and having conversations, and hopefully building in these kids as they mature, they keep those in them, they keep those thoughts and behaviors in them.
And you had touched on it about COVID and, seeing a difference with the kids after COVID and pre-COVID. I know you had mentioned that, you've been trying to do this in your classroom before, but it really took kind of form after COVID. What have you seen in the kids now that are coming into your class? Because that first year coming back out of COVID, they would have been first graders when we went into COVID, if I remember correctly, maybe second graders. So they only had 1 year of quote unquote traditional schooling. The next year and a half had been online. So when they came back, what were some of those, what had you kind of seen in them that was maybe different than pre-COVID?
Well, even last year, I think the kids last year had been in kindergarten and got pulled out that March. And then they were the whole first grade year, they were online. So they had never been in a community with 20 people. Most of them were at home either by themselves or 1 or 2 siblings. They had never been in a structured environment before. And so I called them my little ducklings, because when even my daughter, when we were home during COVID, I was always there to help her with whatever, to have food with her, to go on a walk with her. It was one-on-one, These kids didn't realize in a community of 20 or 23, you kind of have to fend for yourself sometimes, or you don't always come to me. You have to go to each other for help or for answers or for questions. And so I felt like I had 20 of my own kids that first year back. I had to teach them how to become independent, how to stay at their desk, how to ask friends for help rather than coming to me for everything. But I think they felt like kindergartners probably do when they leave their parents for the first time, because these guys had left their parents but then come back to them and had 2 or 3 years with them, And so this year was much better in them being independent, but that first year back, they really had to learn how to be on their own and how to be in a community of 20 rather than in a home with 3 or 4 people.
You almost had to backtrack. And I know we talk about grade level standards and, teaching to grade level or whatever, but I feel like at the human level, we almost had to backtrack to first grade and accelerate them. Hey, this is first grade, second grade. Now we have to get you to third grade on the human level, the soft
level.
skills, the social skills. Yep, absolutely.
And, academically, that's a whole other thing. Academically, we had to work on that too. But socially, I think a lot of kids, because we were on the computer, had spent so much time on the computer and not a lot of time with interaction, and definitely very limited time with interaction with kids their age. And so they had to relearn all of that.
Yeah. And I don't want to just put that on kids, because I think many of us listening have also seen that affect adults as well. It's that adults had kind of lost how to interact. And it's pretty crazy to see how a year or two of the non-normal, socializing, I should say, really changes us. And, I'm 28. I've been, everything had been normal up until 25, 26. So 25 years of life. And in a year or two, it essentially got wiped for so many people, and you almost started back.
Well, and I keep saying this about education, but the whole world eased into opening up again. Restaurants, there were signs you're going to have to wait longer than normal. Everyone eased in except schools. It was like business as usual. You're back in, go for it. And as an adult, that was scary for me. I was used to calm and quiet and nothing happening, back to a full-on busy schedule, So, and we did it to the kids also. It was business as usual. And that was, I don't know if it was the best way to go
challenging.
About it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you had mentioned too that I want to touch a little bit on, because a lot of the guests that I've had on are in leadership, and their kids have grown up and they're in college or they're adults and have careers or whatnot. But being a teacher, especially teacher of younger kids, and then also having a daughter who is in school, because what grade is she in?
She's in 6th grade this year.
She's in 6th grade, so she's moving up and moving on next year. So being a teacher of younger kids and then having a child of your own who is younger, what is that like? Because you have a daughter that you care for at home, but then you come to school and then you have 20 little ones that you care for as well. How do you balance being a mom and being a teacher? Because I think not enough is said about that balance. And I say for principals, they have kids at home, but they also take care of a school. Teachers are that same, just at a more individualized level.
Right. Well, she's my number one teacher. I have to say I'm a better teacher because of what I've learned from her. But she comes to school with me in the morning, so she's talking the whole way. Then I walk in and there's bombarded by kids. And then when the bell rings, you saw she's here right when the bell rings, So what her and I have done, she can see it in my face sometimes, but I've tried to get better at it, is I just need 5 minutes of silence. I don't want to hear anything right now. Just give me 5. And as she's older, that's become easier for us to do. When she was younger, it was probably not very fair of me, but I've learned a ton from her. And so she's made me a better teacher. Yeah.
That's incredible. And I give you a lot of credit, because I know that's not easy. And I have a 2.5-year-old. They don't compare, but you say things and they don't really understand. And I'm sure when she was younger, it didn't really make sense. Why does my mommy not want to talk to me or whatever? And like,
Right.
as you get older and as she was able to understand, like, oh, okay, I get it now. And like, that is your kind of own SEL. Like, that's how you knew that you needed your space. And
Right.
something my wife always said is that, because when you have one, you can balance on and off. Like, I
Right.
can hang out with Rylan, and then when I need time,
Switch.
yes.
Yes.
And she always said, if I don't get my time, I'm not 100% and I can't be the best mom.
Right.
So sure, that 5 minutes might seem like, oh, I need my silence, I don't want to talk, but that allows you to be 100% and that allows you to be the most attentive parent that you can be. So
Right.
I think that
Taking time for ourselves.
absolutely.
Yeah. It's also given me insight to what people's lives look like at home, and I know people will fight me on this, but before I was all about homework and taking it home and practicing. And I've worked so hard all day here that it's hard to go home and then sit with her and do homework and help her through that stuff. So it gives me insight as what it feels like to a parent who, we're lucky we get off early, but a parent who works till 6:00 at night and then has to help with homework and dinner and everything else. So it gives us more insight, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now, so while we're on the topic of your daughter, first I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate the conversation, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours about the SEL stuff and the restorative justice practices and everything else that goes on in this classroom. But I want to bring up the last 2 questions that I ask on every episode. So we will start with the question from the We Are Not Really Strangers game. And the reason I bring up your daughter is because this one kind of involves her. If you could instill one personality trait in your daughter, what would it be?
One personality trait in my daughter, I would say 2. Not take things personal and always be kind to everybody. And I guess to that, I'd say, in this day and age with social media, especially, young girls are taking everything so personal and hurting because of what other people think of them. And if she could just learn that she's a great person and not take other people's opinion of her as long as she's at her best, then she'll get through everything.
Complete side note, I don't want to drill down on it too far, but getting off of social media was the best decision I ever made for that reason. And it wasn't even things about me or being said about me. It was this constant comparison with everything else around me.
Right.
I followed photographers and I'm like, why am I not taking pictures that good? Why am I not this? And, if someone I saw someone flying a drone at the Grand Canyon, which is super illegal. I was like, why are they not getting in trouble? Oh, it's because, and whatever. And my mind would spiral. And I was like, I just don't need that negativity right now.
Exactly.
And so I see that 1,000%. And I think that is fantastic advice and something that, I hope your daughter listens to and takes with her as she grows up. The last question I have is, what is the best piece of advice or guidance that you've received from a teacher or a mentor?
I think my main life mentors were my mom, dad, and my grandpa. And one thing I see in all of them is they take the time to know people's stories. I make fun of my mom because she stops at the store and talks to everybody. My dad, we tell him he should run for mayor. And my grandpa, he had his store for so long, but he knew every customer in their story. So I think just treating every individual or every human as one important individual, I've seen them do that. And I think that's a good life lesson to have.